just to kick things off, we thought we would do a brief introduction to explain who we are, how we met, and why we are doing this. So, Isadore, I'm going to hand over to you.
All right, miigwech, Paul. Isadore Toulouse indigenous cause do Anishinaabemowin Geri Nswe Andeguk de Jeken Meguk Niduk Nswe Andeguk. Isadore Toulouse Shuigo Ndo Jognashinoswin. My name is Isadore Toulouse, known in the English world as Isadore Toulouse, and my Anishinaabe, my Indian name is Nswe Andeguk, known by the Anishinaabe spirits. Nswe Andeguk.
Wonderful. Thank you. Miigwech, Isadore. So I'm Paul Greenberg. I was born and raised in Toronto, went to the US for university, and eventually through work ended up being sent to a number of different places. First New York, a few other countries, but eventually to Tokyo, Japan, where I spent about 15 years. Just returned to Toronto about 2.5 years ago. I'm deeply, deeply interested in learning new languages. I speak 7, and Anishinaabemowin, which I'm currently learning, is the 8th. It is an unbelievable journey so far, and Isadore has been a tremendous mentor and guide through this process. And then a couple of important disclaimers. I am not a professional linguist or an academic linguist. I'm also not originally from the Anishinaabe community, but I am deeply interested in discovering and learning as much as I can in the time that I have. And I'm definitely doing my best to approach all of this with the utmost respect. So in terms of how we met, I'll tell my side of the story, and Isadore can tell his. Basically, my journey with Anishinaabemowin started when I returned to Toronto a couple of years ago. And actually, I went to an art gallery opening where there was a land acknowledgement, and it was done in Anishinaabemowin. I'd never heard the language before, and in fact, I'd never heard of the language, which is kind of crazy to think about. But when I heard it, it was a sound and just a feeling that I've never had ever before when I learned any language. I actually had goosebumps. And so I approached the person who had organized the event and asked them, what is this language? Who is this person who's speaking it? Where can I hear this? And she told me that this was Anishinaabemowin, that it's still spoken, and this light went off with me, which is how A, did I not know about this before, but B, how do I go find it and connect with it and learn about it? So I did some digging around and found a weekly class that I started here in Toronto. And that was good to get up to speed, but I quickly, as I do with all learning languages, is I realized I needed to immerse myself. I needed to really hear actual people speaking it. So a friend of mine who I met here in Toronto told me that I need to go up to his community, which is Wikwemkong up in Manitoulin Island. So he made a phone call, put me in touch, and I got in my car and drove north and landed there, met some people, and had the most unbelievable experience you can possibly imagine. And that's where I first saw Isadore. Met him at a few community events. I was really impressed with just him as a person, and also his obviously grasp and command of the language, and his openness to share that with other people. And so over the past few months, when I was sort of started to think about this idea of a discussion like this, Isadore was the first and only name that came to mind. And I spent a few weeks wavering over whether I should call him and suggest this, thinking he might think I'm nuts. But anyway, I did. And he was very receptive, and here we are. So Isadore, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Well, I haven't really put away the thought of you being nuts yet, but so.
That's awesome. So, yeah, maybe do you recall? Because I remember the first time I met you was actually, I think it was at a community event at the high school in Wikwemkong.
Right. It was the language conference that took place there, where Nanotic was the guest speaker, the keynote speaker for that language conference that took place.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about why we're doing this. If you want to go first, what made you sort of think, a yes, this is a good idea, and yes, this guy who I think is nuts, I'll have some conversations with him online.
Well, why I'd like to continue with this format? It seems the new, to me, the new in thing, podcasting, the whole idea of talking about, in generalities, about the language, about the Anishinaabemowin, and having having you, Paul, as a sincere, motivated, down to earth individual, wanting to know more about the Anishinaabe language, about who we are as Anishinaabe people, is really profound. Is really exciting for me to be able to share our values, our ways, our language to you. And my thing is, teach the language to anybody that wants to learn it. That's the way it should be. You're
Mhm,
here in our country, you should be learning our language.
mhm. Wonderful. Okay, well, for me, very simply stated, one big motivator for me is I feel like I'm making up for lost time. I feel like it's a travesty that I didn't know about the language when I was young, growing up here in Toronto. I didn't have the opportunity to engage with it. I wasn't even aware that it existed. The irony for me is that I traveled, I guess I've been to about 45 countries and very much focused on learning languages. And a big part of that for me is always about seeing something new, because every language always gives you something new, a new way to see something, a new way to think, and looking to expand upon that. And the irony is that I went all over the world looking for something that ultimately was a few hours away from where I grew up. And I didn't even know it was there. But now I do. Time is of the essence, and I want to do everything I possibly can to learn as much as I can. So that's my motivation.